can't forgive. I go all in this time, yeah, I won't regret. I'll pick the best on trip, they don't understand. I play to win, yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Oh, play to win, I play to win. Yeah, I play to win, I play to win.
That is a fantastic opening for the Nick Script P2W Play to Win YouTube channel. But I'm John McGlynn. You can welcome the Commissioner Evaluation Show. And you can find me on the Twitter machine at John McGlynn75. Also, welcome everyone that's already drafted in the Scott Fish Bowl last weekend. I saw a lot of good stuff all over Twitter. Some live drafts going on. Today's the actual kickoff of Scott Fish Bowl online drafts. So have a great time, everyone. Also joining us today is the handsome and talented THEO. The O G Theo Gremminger, being the man at a well-respected site like Player Profiler. I can't wait to talk about that. We'll breeze through some NFL news and rumors. We'll review some trades that went down in my Mighty McGlynn home dynasty leagues, and then we'll evaluate a team to see if it's a rebuild or remodel, and some suggestions on how to get it where it belongs. So let's get into my show.
Is in. Let the fun begin. This is the Commissioner Evaluation Podcast with your host, John McGlynn.
Was that Herms?
He got them guests on the Rolodex, stopping by to talk about some Dynasty Superflex. Everybody, yo, Commish is in. It's time to sit down to listen to John McGlynn. Yo, who we trading, who we fading, who we getting off the squad. Knowledge never overrated, playing for number one. And yo, McGlynn is in. It's time to let the fun begin. It's the Commissioner Evaluation Podcast with John McGlynn.
Theo, tell me about yourself. What's going on in this fantasy football world? What a Twitter machine could find you, and some stuff you do in the fantasy football world that makes everybody want to follow you, man.
So was that Nick Script on the mic?
That was Herms NFL. I don't know if you know Herms.
Oh, I do know Herms. That's pretty good.
Herms does really a lot of good shit. I always shout him out. I'm not sure why I didn't say it this time, but yeah, I asked Herms, "Can you do it for me?" He's like, "Yeah, just buy me a drink at the expo and I'll make you one." So I gave him a couple bucks and I'll buy him a beer anyway. But yeah, he does such a great job on those kind of those intros.
That was very, very cool. Yeah, so you can find me at the OG Fantasy. I'm on Twitter all the time, and you can find me at Player Profiler. I'm on a few podcasts. I'm on Sonic Truth Pod with Matt Kelly, the Podfather. I'm on First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio. I am still in the GOAT District once a week. And then I also started a new podcast called Press Coverage, and I'm actually dropping episode number 3 today, later on today, which is pretty cool. So I'm a busy guy, John. I'm a busy guy, but I love talking shop with you. It's like an annual thing for us, and yeah, man, I'm stoked for today.
I subscribe to everything you're on, so I hear it all. You have some fantastic guests. Everything you talk about, and I love how you like some people are like on you, like you are just like laser focused on like what you're doing. You are so into fantasy football. It's so awesome to see you take this so seriously, and like you are like a master, a professional at your job. So thanks for all you do, first of all, and thanks for taking it so seriously, and thanks for doing what you do in this fantasy community, man. You are a rising rocket ship in this industry, man. I
appreciate that. And I want to give you and Nick a big thanks because you guys both contributed to the world famous draft kit, which was really, really cool to have you guys involved. You guys both crushed it.
It was great. Thanks for involving us. So thanks for letting us be involved in that draft kit. It's a great tool, great everything. Everything at Player Profiler is fantastic. That's one day I'll be part of that whole enterprise thing, but I got a little more work to do before I'm up to the race of you talented and awesome fellas over there. But tell me about a day outside of life of the, outside this Twitter machine grind of the handsome and talented Theo Gremminger. So like family, pets, cars, all that kind of stuff. What do you do for like fun?
So for me, I'm very family focused. I live on Long Island, and I have 3 kids, and my kids are all little. So John, I know your kids are a little bit older now, heading off to college, but mine are very much like young. I have a 4-year-old, I have a 6-year-old, and I have a little girl who's turning 8. So I'm very busy. So it's like nonstop activities. Like, during the summer, it's not quite as crazy, but my son does martial arts, and I'm just running all over the place. And I still like to lift weights, and that's kind of like my mental health thing, like to get a little bit of exercise. But other than that, I'm just grinding, man. Fantasy football. This is the time of year. I'm drafting a lot. I'm writing. I'm podcasting. and just trying to find like the edges this year. I think it's getting more and more difficult to kind of separate yourself. I think that there's more and more information available to us. Like you just punch in anything you want on Google or Twitter, you're going to get a million, free things to read about it. So it's kind of like being able to sift through what's real, sift through what's not, and sift through the things that can help my fantasy teams and the things that are actually going to hurt my fantasy teams. Because I think too much information can really get you. You start liking every single player, and you start kind of buying into everybody at ADP, and then your teams are just going to be right in the middle.
Yeah, I listen to like 50 podcasts, and I hear, I used to talk to Mike Tagliere all the time about it. He goes, "You're ruining your brain doing that. You're listening to 15 different views about the same player, and you don't know which decision to make." But I take notes on a lot of that stuff, and I write down what people say. I take things with a grain of salt, and then I kind of look at sites like Player Profiler and look at some stats, some previous history, some player history, and sites like 4for4, Dynasty Nerds, all stuff like that. I kind of putz around in every once in a while, and look at what they have as far as their rankings, what they say about players, a lot of professional opinions about stuff. And I make my own decisions, so I make my own rankings depending on that kind of stuff. So if you take stuff with a grain of salt, that's cool. But I love hearing other people's opinions about stuff. And there's nobody's opinion's wrong. No, if this was that easy, somebody would be the flagship guy that knows everything and gets everything right all the time. But this is like playing a lottery or anything else, like doing a stock market. We're all guessing. We're doing our best to make the most intelligent guess we possibly can. But it doesn't work out all the time, and we're putting our best foot forward, and that's all that matters.
We got to find out. We'll find out in about 3 months who's wrong.
Yeah, well,
that's the fun thing. That's the fun thing about fantasy football is it's zero sum. You're either right or you're wrong. Your team's either win or you lose, and I think there's that's the best thing about it is like the pressure that comes with it. Everybody who's listening to podcasts in this time of July wants to win in fantasy. No one just is like, I just want to be in a league. Everybody wants to win. And I think that these things matter. And I think you're doing it the right way, John. And I'm the same. I'm constantly like whenever I'm in the car, at the gym, whatever, I'm trying to listen to other people's opinions too. And I think you can take little things away from pretty much anything if you listen hard enough. And I think they can, being able to sift the stuff that doesn't make sense to you with the stuff that does. I mean, I think that's going to make you really, really sharp.
Absolutely. What sports did you play growing up? Are you like did you play football, basketball, baseball, that kind of stuff? What did you?
I played a lot of things, but I definitely played some football. But for me, my biggest sports in high school were basketball and baseball. I was probably better at baseball. Basketball, I managed to start on a pretty good varsity team, all boys Catholic school. I certainly wasn't the best player, but I definitely had like a lot of grit, and we were pretty good. So I kind of caught that bug. And then I just kind of stopped growing, but it didn't go away. And I loved high school basketball more than anything. High school baseball, you're a Chicago guy. I grew up in actually the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland. And, those cold months of spring sports, it's a labor of love, John. But basketball, it was like year round. DC area was a really big basketball scene. And I just loved it. I was so into it, and I played all the time. And I think a lot of guys get the bug in basketball, and that's a great thing. It's weather. You don't have to worry about weather. So I was constantly in a gym somewhere, and that was definitely the sport I loved the most in high school.
Yeah, I went to an all boys Catholic school too, and I think people that's such an underrated experience. If you didn't get to experience that, go to school with just all boys. There's no drama, no girls involved, no nothing. Just it's no BS. There's not many fights. If there was fights, it was really for a reason that you fought somebody, not to impress somebody or do something else. It was just great teachers, great students, great faculty. I went to Butler Rice High School in Chicago, and
I know that one. That's a big time school.
It's Mount Carmel, St. Rita, all these. You have a lot of great a lot of great rivalries, a lot of great all the other Catholic schools, kind of stuff like that. And I when you said that, I didn't know that you went to an all Catholic school like that. It was just I think that's a blessing that people got to do stuff like that. I had such a great time.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, but it like for if you go to the right one, it's like a lot of camaraderie, and I'm sure you had like a lot of good friends there, and I loved it for the sports. But I don't know if my kids would want to do that. They're in public school on Long Island, great public schools where I live now. So we'll see though. We'll see.
Same with me. I'm on the playing field out in the southwest suburbs, and outside that. It's literally like $15,000 for high school now for each school of kids. So it's with 4 kids, there's no way I could spend $60,000 for a Catholic school. So
it's wild.
It is what it is. Yeah. But What was your favorite hobby before fantasy football? What did you do before you got into the fantasy football world for fun?
I think when I was younger and didn't have kids, I probably watched more TV shows, and I would say certain shows I really got into. Like I think I'm kind of an expert with some Sopranos stuff. I still love it today. But I always was into sports, even when it wasn't like a deep thing in fantasy football. And I think it was more of just like you're a fan of sports and you're a fan of competing. And it was like let's face it, everybody likes a little bit of skin in the game. Everybody likes to gamble on something. And fantasy football was something where once I started doing it, I'm like, this totally makes sense. And you try to get better and better at it. And it just sort of became a thing. So I think my hobbies were pretty normal. But now it's like all fantasy football and family.
Yeah, I think I never had a hobby because there was always lob league or basketball or fast pitch against a school or something. So we didn't have like one hobby. We're just always busy. I guess that my brother collected baseball cards, and that was about the extent of like hobbies. But we never really played video games. There's always just being outside. So that's part of growing up. But what's you play a lot of high stakes leagues. What's considered high stakes? We all play some pretty expensive leagues, stuff like that. But what do you consider high stakes?
So I think that there's like for high stakes for you should be whatever you can afford, whatever's significant to your bankroll. But I think in the general speak in fantasy, I think that for redrafts it's the $350 leagues which have a huge maiden prize. There's a few different sites that have them, and you're playing not only for a nice payday for the season, but you're playing to get to that next level and play for like a ton of money. And I think that that's also affected best ball, where best ball has it's a little bit lower price entry point, but like if you're talking FFPC, NFFC, those $125 contests have a really nice payout with a little bit less entrance than you would have for like the $35 payouts. So I think that's kind of become like the chosen thing. I mean, if you want to play in the really, really high stakes, there's some insanely like 4-figure entries, 5-figure entry leagues. And I know some guys who compete in them. I know some guys who won a ton of money, but I think the most common thing for NFFC, FFWC, and FFPC is the $350 contests. I think they have all had them. And I think that the reason they do that is because you can buy a 3-pack for $1,000, and then you have 3 different entries into like a big ticket at the end of the year, where you could win life-changing amount of money. Yeah,
I see people win the millions, and I'm like, I know people have a lot of entries and they have sponsors and all that kind of stuff too. But I see one guy had like 700 entries. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. How do you get like 700 entries?
Well, Chad Schroeder is probably the best player in the country in terms of the amount of money he's made. Lives in Nebraska. He's fantastic. You rarely hear him on podcasts. He's come on Goat District a couple times, and he's actually going to come on Player Profiler this summer at some point. I've heard him on. I think he went on Establish the Run at some point, but has a tremendous amount of skin in the game, and he also backloads it. He doesn't draft right now. He waits till like the very end of July and then drafts literally nonstop all of August. And he'll also, John, he'll do 2-handed, once in a while 3-handed drafts, where he'll have literally like 3 screens open with 3 significant entry drafts. So yeah, there's people with significant money in the game, but a lot of these people have learned how to budget their money. They're not like risking their life and ruining their life with it. A lot of it's like, how much I won last season can also affect how much I enter this year. Maybe if you had a poor season the year before, you scale it back slightly. You don't double down. Fantasy football is something where, especially nowadays with all the, betting on props, with all the best ball opportunities and all the high stakes. I mean, you can draft 24/7 and you can put as much money as you want into it, but it's about being able to budget your time. And I think the thing that people also need to understand is the more teams you put money into and the more teams that you manage, whether it's dynasty or redraft, certainly not best ball, you have to be active on the waiver wire in all of those leagues. So you're talking about adding like a full-time job if you become one of these super high volume guys. So a lot of the guys you see that have won a ton of money in fantasy, like the Nelson Sousas and B-Bag Batobas, like people's lives on Tuesday nights, Wednesdays are insane. There's some guys who stay up all night long on Tuesday nights to get all those Wednesday waivers in. They don't sleep. It's wild. So it's a labor of love, and it's chasing, that big amount of money at the end of the year.
Yeah, that and like I talked to Scott Connor, he's on here before, talking about setting lineups with 85 leagues on Sunday morning. He's like, I don't go to football games. I don't do anything. I don't leave my couch. I don't leave my desk on Sunday morning. I get up at 5 a.m. I start setting this guy, that guy. I get my lineups going, but I have to go back, double check. Then the 3 o'clock games and the 7 o'clock games and Monday night. Every day, he's like, the entire weekend is just completely filled with setting lineups.
Scott is a big portfolio guy. Like when it comes to Dynasty. When it comes to Dynasty, Scott, like, he's got it down to a science. Everything is a spreadsheet. He knows his exposure to everyone. He could probably tell you how many CeeDee Lamb teams he has out of 85. And he's also doing redrafts. So he's like a machine. I'd say that I'm pretty organized. But again, like, I don't record podcasts on Wednesdays. I'm not doing it. I can't do it because my waivers are due at 10 o'clock at night on Wednesdays in like the big formats I play. Tuesday night, I try to get it in as much as possible. But John, you know how that is. NFL, the news changes. You get a late news dump. You find out about an injury. It's not perfectly clean. You don't find out about the injuries guys had on Sunday. They're getting evaluated for injuries. Like, you can sometimes find news on Wednesday morning. And then you also have to be speculative. Like, a lot of leagues do their waivers on Tuesday. You've got to kind of like gauge, whether a guy's getting treatment or he's actually going to miss some time. I mean, there's a lot to it. So the more and more leagues that you have, the more and more information you need to be able to balance, and the more and more work you need to put in on the waiver wire. Because I'll say this, you don't know one single fantasy manager who's won a lot in fantasy that doesn't grind waivers. That's just a true altruism. Like, guys can have different strategies on how they draft. Guys can have different strategies on the structure of their team, whether it's dynasty, whether it's redraft, it doesn't matter. Guys that are really good are constantly hitting that waiver wire.
Yes, it's it's a labor of love for sure, but it's definitely a necessity to make your team better. It is what it is. So,
yep.
What's your favorite food when you're glued to the TV watching Red Zone on Sunday afternoons?
That's a good one. I've tried to cut back on like the big junk foods on Sundays, but I mean, I live on Long Island, so I enjoy Italian food. I have my kids like a pizza, so I guess that would be kind of like if I'm gonna eat junk food on a Sunday, it's probably something Italian. My kids are on a Mexican food kick, but that hasn't really translated to Sunday yet. So I don't think that's been a big deal so far. But I would say Sundays usually Italian.
Italian food, huh? That's it. There's a lot of good places by me, a lot of cheap bars, restaurants, stuff like that, like Dower Drafts and half price appetizers on Sunday afternoon. It's fantastic. Or we just go to somebody's garage and get pizza, or one of the wives makes like some kind of like shrimp de Dijon or some kind of stuff like that. It all changes all the time. Fried chicken, whatever somebody feels like making. So I don't have a favorite per se, but chicken wings is always kind of a staple for everyone, for most people. So that's that or hamburgers or shit like that. It's definitely what it's all about. So what's more fun? Let's get into some commissioner questions here. What's more fun, drafting a ton of high stakes basketball teams with like all the Sharks, or your home league in that they get together in person drafts?
Well, it's funny because some of the high stakes leagues have become kind of like my home league. I do the NFFC New York Super, which is like the big one for me. It's in New York City, and some of the guys that I usually draft it with Nelson Sousa, who's one of the better players I think around. He's right up there after Chad, and we usually split a team in that league. And that's become kind of like a de facto home league because you draft against the same guys every single year.
Right.
And then I'd say I get the same vibes with some of the FFPC drafters that I draft against. And then for me, I've become like the dynasty leagues I'm in have really become more like, guys that I really know and enjoy competing against. To be honest with you, like the more and more the years have gone, it's been a little less home leagues just because I don't want to play in so many formats. So like I still keep a Yahoo league with a couple of buddies, but I'm mostly FFPC and NFFC. I just don't want to bounce around. Obviously I have a little bit of MFL, and then, sleeper, I'll be in a couple of sleeper leagues as well. But I feel like if I'm going to have a ton of teams, I've got to be able to navigate the formats. And if I'm constantly switching between websites, it makes everything a little less efficient. And also it's more and more scoring to have to manage. So there's like a lot more to goes into it. So for me, I enjoy like I'd say my long-term dynasty league. I'm in a league called the Hardway League in FFPC. And I think that's probably my favorite dynasty league because we have such a great Twitter chat. And we also have a Hardway redraft league, which is a great Twitter chat. But it's like you kind of get to know these guys, you meet them over the years, and that has become kind of like my home leagues. But I definitely enjoy a nice live draft with friends as well, John. That's always a great fun.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It sounds like you got it counted down to science on both sides of the spectrum over there. So that's great. What's the biggest problem you have in these high stake leagues you play, like mostly like the big online leagues?
Biggest problem, the competition's really good, and I'd say that the biggest problem I had my biggest season was 2019. I had a really good 2020. I'd say that last year, the biggest issue I had was I didn't get enough Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, which were just such low-hanging fruit, and those teams had enough pass-through rates. Thankfully, I did get, and when I say pass-through rates, I mean the teams that qualified for like the big money playoffs. I had enough Jalen Hurts that it kind of was able to overcome it, but I had a little too much Lamar Jackson, a little too much Kyler Murray, and that hurt me. I'd say generally I do pretty well in these leagues. I think I'm able to spot like kind of the mispriced players, and I think that's like I think that's a great way of looking at ADP. If you're going to use ADP as a guide, find the guys that really don't make sense to you and you think could really bust. I think that's more beneficial than saying like kind of the micro tiers, because at the end of the day, John, if I take Stephon Diggs instead of CeeDee Lamb or CeeDee Lamb instead of Stephon Diggs, I don't think that's going to ruin my draft at all.
No.
Both guys are going to score a lot. That's a great foundational pick for the back end of the first round. But it's when you pass on the opportunity for a potential Josh Jacobs or Jamar Chase in 2021, that's always like those guys are there every year, like the 6th round, 7th round values. So I really try to dive in and try to find those guys. And then I also think you have to look at teammate situations. I think this is one of the most underrated edges you can get. You have to, like, when we talk about that Jamar Chase year, he was going behind T. Higgins. The same year Robert Woods was going ahead of Cooper Kupp. The same year Deebo Samuel was going behind Brandon Ayuk. Like, teammate arbitrage plays, they're there every year in fantasy. And those are the ones you really can exploit because the market thinks it's going to be one way. A guy breaks through, offense coordinator goes a different way, and talent rises to the top. So I've really tried to identify those lately as well. But I'll say this year, John, like, it's getting harder and harder to find an edge at quarterback, and I think you've just got to embrace it. I think like the one thing the one position that's usually rankers get right in the preseason is quarterback, and this year the guys are all steamed up. Like, you have to have a cutoff of the guy that you feel comfortable with. For some people, it's Deshaun Watson. After you get below that player, you are kind of speculating, and you need to be really careful because a really good build could be playing catch up. Because some of these quarterbacks that are truly elite this year, I think are going to score a shitload of points.
Yeah, when I start any of my dynasty teams, first thing I do is I draft the best. Like, I draft best player available on every round. I don't care if I only have one running back and the 3 receivers go next 3 rounds after I've already had 4 receivers. I don't care. I'll trade for running backs later, but it's always best player available when I draft my teams. But I traded up with 104 it was 104 to get Trevor Lawrence, and then after the draft is over with, I traded a bunch of stuff away, which we'll talk about later, to get Patrick Mahomes. But now I have a brand new startup draft, and my 3 quarterbacks are Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, and I think my 3rd one is Daniel Jones or something like that. I forgot who it was on that one. But like, quarterback position is the hardest place to change to get back in the game on if you punt on an initial startup draft. So that's definitely my go-to as far as my draft strategy is concerned. Anyway.
Yeah, super flex. You really can't play. You can't catch up. Because, like, once you get a Mahomes, it doesn't matter what you do with the rest of your team. You've got that advantage. And it's so hard to play catch-up. Like, the guys that come in the league, like, to break into that truly elite core of quarterbacks, you can go 2 draft classes without seeing one. Like, we love this next year's draft class with Caleb Williams, Drake May. But there's no guarantee those guys are going to get to top 5 quarterback level as much as we like them. So it's like getting those long-term quarterback answers is just so helpful in Superflex Dynasty. It's like a cheat code.
Yeah, I'm already seeing those guys getting flip-flopped in the rankings every other week. Who's going to be the better quarterback. They don't know. Look at the quarterbacks who were projected to be number one 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and they weren't even in the top 20 quarterbacks by the time the season rolled around. So that stuff happens all the time. I'd rather just go for the best ones that are in the league already and establish themselves than kind of mess around with that kind of stuff. But
even like right now, Anthony Richardson's the most valuable rookie quarterback in Superflex, like in terms of how much you could trade for and where he's going in startups.
Yeah.
And if you looked at last summer, it was Bryce Young and CJ Stroud were the top two, no matter who you asked. Like Anthony Richardson being worth more than those guys in this shorter period of time. Even the sharpest Devy guys were not going to project that. So I think that, like, yeah, you're absolutely right. The biggest indicator of quarterback success is previous NFL quarterback success. And when you get one of those guys like Mahomes or Allen, I mean, Jalen Hurts was kind of like the found money guy for startups because he was that great value because people were worried about him losing his job. So, like, if you got him in a startup, that was kind of the cheat code. But taking Allen, taking Mahomes, it's just a no-brainer. You don't have to make this game complicated.
Right, exactamundo. What's your favorite kind of league to play in, like a redraft or dynasty?
I like them both probably about equally. I'd say Dynasty is more Dynasty. You maybe get more out of because it's year round and you're thinking about it. And if you like rookie drafts as much as I do, then you get to do those. Redraft, I think, is amazing though because the draft that you have, the management of the team. Like if you have a really good Dynasty roster, there's less management. You're not going to move a guy because it's a lot like more steady in season. Off season, the dynasty leagues are a lot busier, but I'd say like I honestly love them both. I really, really do. I think that's not a cheesy answer. I think it's a tie for me, but I'll definitely say the obsessiveness is to the dynasty leagues because the dynasty leagues, you just like that off season. It's like you're so focused on the rookie draft. You're so focused on the NFL combine. It's just, I love the off season for dynasty, but it's a tie for me, John. I love them both.
Yes, very good. That's redraft has become more like a horse race kind of mentality to me, which I don't like that because now I'm in so many dynasty leagues. I don't even like doing redraft. I do the fishbowl, a couple other charity tournaments, stuff like that for fun. But I do stuff with my neighborhood people, my neighborhood friends, and these my wife and a bunch of her friends all jumped into a fantasy football league, which is cool because everybody comes over to the garage, drinks beers, and watches some of the football games. The girls it keeps a little bit more interest, keeps the husband and his wives together, kind of stuff like that. But like they just show up on draft day and have no idea. I'll take Josh Adams, like come on, man. Like there's no, they've almost taken the fun out of redraft because the cheat sheets are so good now with all the redraft stuff. There's so many it's not like the 20 years ago or 25 years ago where people would show up in a magazine like it was printed 4 months ago and everybody, half the guys are hurt or retired or injured or whatever, didn't even know about it. There's no edge anymore in fantasy football. That's the problem. So, what's your favorite size league? 10, 12, 14, like copy leagues, like multi-copy leagues. What do you like to do there?
I place for some 14 in NFFC, but it's 12. 12 is the best. 12 makes the most sense. I think that 12 is like the most natural size for a fantasy football league. I respect people that do higher entry leagues. 10, you start talking about like kind of having super lineups, and anything lower than 10 is just crazy to me.
Yeah. I played in 12-team 2-quarterback. We had to start 2 quarterbacks every week, and it's like a bloodbath in those leagues because if your quarterback goes down, you're trading Saquon Barkley for Baker Mayfield and stuff like that. It's ruthless in those kind of leagues, and people know it too. So it's 12-team dynasty leagues that were absolutely fantastic. But now Superflex kind of took over. It's not so. It's not a death sentence if you lose a quarterback in Superflex. You can kind of still make trades or you have some negotiation, but it's terrible in a 12-team 2-quarterback. Taxi squad or expand the rosters?
Expand the rosters. I think having larger rosters makes sense. I don't mind like an IR or a taxi squad, but I think having a larger roster just makes the leagues more competitive and it rewards good drafting. It rewards good roster management.
Good man. You still play with kickers or no?
Yes, in most formats I play with kickers. Some I don't. Some are no kickers, no defenses now, John.
A lot of them are. I hate kickers and defenses. It's just a crapshoot. There's no, if you get last like 5 years, if you had the Patriots defense on a dynasty team, like so, it's like it's like having Travis Kelce of like the defense position on your team. It's not even fair, that kind of stuff.
I like Jake Moody. I think Jake Moody's going to be a long-term answer for you, John. Just at the San Francisco 49ers kicker. I think that kid's a stud. Look where they drafted him. He was so good at Michigan. So I think like if you're a dynasty manager, you don't want to worry about it. Just get the kid Moody.
I might do that in Fishbowl. We'll see what happens. I have no idea, but my theory for kickers is I take the best kicker that plays in a dome with the latest bye week. That's kind of my just so I don't have to mess around with the kicker at all for the whole season. That's kind of my theory. So that
is smart. That's definitely smart.
Any IDP or Devy leagues?
No, I don't do those. I have respect for both for managers who do them. I know some people who love them, but I don't do it.
Yeah, I've gotten into. I don't do the IDP. I love defense. I played offensive left tackle my whole life from like fourth grade all the way through college. So I love, the defensive side of the ball, just the grinding of the game, defensive linemen, linebackers, all that kind of stuff. I have such respect for them, but it's just too much. It's just too much to get into all that. I've gotten into Devy league with it. The Devy Royale guys, the Devy Royale guys like Jeff Bell and Christian Williams and Kevin Coleman, those guys, they've showed me so much. And like iron sharpens iron in these fantasy football leagues and these dynasty leagues. I learned so much from these guys. I couldn't believe how much fun I have in the Devy leagues just because of the fact that they're always talking about all these guys. Oh, this guy did this and this guy did that. And I'm learning so much by being in Devy that my rookie drafts have become so much easier. It's only been 1 year, but this year's rookie draft, I felt like I was so much more prepared for than years in the past. So, all right, let's jump to Let's jump to some quick hits, some NFL news and rumors. So I'm going to just to ask a team here. This is my version of like current news, stuff that's going on in these football teams. Just chime in real fast. Your best answer. The Bears, Roshan, Herbert, or Foreman for redraft or dynasty. Which one of these guys are you taking?
I think they're all kind of interesting for redraft because none of them are going ahead of like running back 40 right now.
Right.
And they had a lot of RB1 weeks between Montgomery and Herbert last year. I think they had 11 RB1 weeks. Despite being like pretty low in points per game scoring. So I think it's a backfield you want to take shots on. Herbert has dropped so much that he's probably the one, and he probably gets first crack at the starting lineup. I do think Roshan's interesting, though, because I think he's a bigger back. I think he's a little more versatile. Herbert can't catch the ball, and if they want to throw the ball to the running back at all, and they want to have just like a little bit more balance in Chicago's attack, then I think Roshan's the guy. So Herbert and Roshan tied, John. I think, but the mistake would be picking both. Just pick one and go for that one and take your shot. And if you lose, you lose. But you could get completely jammed if it's a running back by committee if you use 2 picks on those guys.
Yeah, Herbert. I liked Herbert so much last year. I figured when he gets his chance, he's going to be the guy. And then he brought in Foreman and Roshan. I love Roshan Johnson. I think Cody Carpentier kind of like he brainwashed me into loving Roshan. But the more and more I look at him, the more I love the guy. So
he's a beast.
He's a big back. He catches the ball. You watch any highlight film on Roshan Johnson. I just see how much of a beast he really is. I'm taking him everywhere. It is what it is. I'm rolling the dice on Roshan because I love big backs that can catch the ball. He's like a hybrid of what I like in every part of an NFL running back.
There was the Colorado game. If you want to just watch Roshan, like put in the clips from the Colorado game. Colorado was one of the worst teams. Now they got Dion. They're going to get a ton of players. But last year they were awful. And Roshan just destroyed them. It looked like a Madden video game of what he was doing to Colorado. So, yeah, his problem is he played next to Bijan Robinson. So people were like, there's no production. Well, nobody's going to have production next to Bijan Robinson.
Right. Why is Charlie Jones so tempting to stash? I have him in like 5 or 6 leagues now, and I don't know why I can't pass him up.
I think that's an interesting one because, Tyler Boyd's getting a little older. And I think Charlie Jones is kind of like a natural replacement for him if they do move on from Boyd in a year. So I don't think you're wrong. Like we've seen a lot of these 4th round wide receivers hit, and Charlie Jones has a ton of college production and a ton of speed. He's a little bit older, so you have a little less upside there. It's not like you're getting some 20-year-old, but I believe Charlie Jones is a little bit older. I don't know his exact age, but he's a little bit more of a finished product, but you might have an opportunity to have the number 3 target on the Bengals a year from now. I think that's a fine stash.
Bills, are you targeting Trent Sherfield or Khalil Shakir? Because it's Diggs and Gabe Davis, I think, is a little bit overrated, and Shakir seems to be the guy that they want to push in there. But I just think Sherfield's a little bit underrated. I know Jay drafted Justin Shorter, and if Dalton Kincaid doesn't really pan out, like is there really a chance here where Sherfield could be the starting slot receiver?
I don't know if I love either one of those guys. I still think like Gabe Davis has some value because he's fallen so much, and we've seen him have big spike games in the NFL with Josh Allen. So like that part of the wide receiver drafting, like all it would take is like one more big spike game, and all of a sudden his scoring looks much better. So it's I don't know. I'm not ready to completely give up on Gabe Davis. I love Dalton Kincaid. I expected more out of Shakir. Shakir had like when he had the opportunity, he first looked pretty good, and then they stopped playing him. So I wonder a little bit about how good he really is. And I think like when you're looking at guys like Shorter and Sherfield, you're kind of like, it's just speculation. I'd rather take a shot on Kincaid. I think Kincaid's going to be really fun, and I'm hoping James Cook, they use him a little more as a receiver out of the backfield.
Yeah, you're going to have to draft Kincaid so much higher than you know, if you want to get Kincaid on that offense, because everybody's viewing him as a slot receiver right now. So, I think Dawson Knox is a little bit underrated, and to be honest with you, for that offense. But
yeah, I could see that. I mean, Dawson Knox, you've seen him catch a lot of touchdowns, and maybe if they're in 12, it creates more touchdown opportunities. And the tight end position is so gross that, Dalton Kincaid having like an 8 touchdown season and being playable, a Josh Allen correlation type play. But I do think Kincaid's going to hit. I think Kincaid is fun, and I think the steam is dropping a little bit because I think people are getting really into Chigakonkwo, getting a little more into Dulcich, and I think those two, and a little bit more. Higbee's also like, people are like, okay, we're not going to let Higbee go as late as we did. So like those 3 guys are kind of pushing into the range Kincaid was at. So now it's a little bit easier. You're probably getting Kincaid like tight end 14, where you'd probably have to spend like tight end 10 on him like 5 weeks ago. So I think he's becoming a little bit more affordable, and he's a baller. I think he's a stud, and I think that them using him in the slot is going to happen. And I also think he's a little bit older, and they're not going to ask him to block. So this whole thing about rookie tight ends can't contribute, it can if they don't have to block. And I think Kincaid can go out there and catch passes right away and help Josh Allen.
He's going like 105, 106, 107 in rookie drafts now, which is crazy. I don't have any picks that high, so I'm not going to have him anywhere. And everybody needs tight end. Nobody wants to pass on the next big thing. So
the argument against him in rookie drafts, that I think is the logical one, is you have other rookie tight ends in this class that could be really good, and now they're cheaper. Like I know you're a Notre Dame guy, Michael Mayer and Sam Laporta. Like those 2 guys are both much more affordable, and they both can end up being an excellent pros. And there's a couple other guys who were drafted pretty highly when it comes to tight end, and they're cheap. They're free right now. So I think that's Musgrave. Musgrave was a 2nd round pick. They go ahead and take Kraft, but Musgrave is going to be on the field a ton, and he's a hyper athlete. So, we'll see. But I think Kincaid is safe. I think it's a really good tight end class, to be honest with you. I think you want some of those rookie tight ends on your dynasty teams. I think it could be like a transformative year at tight end.
Yeah, I have a bunch of early 2nd round picks I traded for, and I'm kind of targeting Sam Laporta at those picks because I think he has the best opportunity. Not that I think he's the best tight end. I think he has the best opportunity of all the tight ends in this class.
Yeah.
So if Javonte Williams is actually healthy, which is reported, is he going to finish like a running back 2 this year with a little bit of backfield competition that he has, or is he? You think they're going to ease him into this season?
I don't know. It's hard to say, because I think that I don't think this coaching staff necessarily views him as some guy that they need to ease in. Like I think this coaching staff, look at what they gave up to get Sean Payton, and this coaching staff wants to win. But this coaching staff might think that their best way of winning is having a true backfield by committee and using Samaje Perine, the guy that they went out and targeted in free agency, and using Javonte. So I think it could be kind of an annoying split.
Yeah.
And it was constantly annoying because Javonte's shown the ability to catch the football, but Samaje can catch the football as well. So I think it could be an annoying split. I think that's probably Sean Payton. Think about some of his most successful teams. There were multiple running backs getting work. So I think for me, he could be an RB2, but I don't know if he's going to have an impactful enough points per game that you're even going to notice it. Because RB scoring's pretty flat when you get to those back end RB2s. It's not like a huge edge from like RB20 to RB like 31, you know?
Yeah. Did Elijah Moore kill David Njoku's value?
He definitely hurt it. And I wonder how much Elijah Moore can hurt Amari Cooper's value. Because I think Cleveland loves Elijah Moore. And I think they're going to give him opportunities to make plays. And we saw last year, like Amari Cooper, and again, the whole offense was down with Deshaun. But when Deshaun started his 6 games with Amari Cooper, he had like one game that was over 20 points. And then one game where I think he cracked the wide receiver 2 line. And the other games were just abysmal. So even like the offense was struggling, it's not like he had tunnel vision for Amari. So like Amari has gotten into like the 130 range for targets a few times in his career. But I don't know. I think Amari might be getting overdrafted right now. And Elijah Moore, like everybody's saying, by all accounts, he's tearing up camp. And who knows? Deshaun Watson's also, if Deshaun Watson is settled in and back to being old Deshaun Watson, like the only guy that he really force-fed targets to was DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know if Amari's that kind of an alpha. I certainly don't think he's a DeAndre Hopkins. And I think it could be more likely that Amari's like a back-end wide receiver 2 and Elijah Moore can be a wide receiver 3. And it's a little bit more of a, it's a little bit more of a spread out offense than some people think.
Yeah. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones might be a factor in that offense too. We'll see what happens. It's kind of a mess over there. So Buccaneers, who's going to come in and ruin Rachaad White for us?
I don't know if it's ruin Rachaad White because I think it's his backfield. I think it just might be a combination of Baker Mayfield's going to check down to the running back, I think, a little more than people think.
Yes.
But I think that it just could be like the offense could struggle and Rachaad White might just be like more of a kind of a purgatory play where he's not going to like really, really elevate your team. I'd still bet on Rachaad White. I think he catches the ball well enough that he could be a high-end RB2. But I think that the fear would be that the offense just doesn't support, a back enough that he's going to really, really help our teams. And he's not like cheap in redraft. And he's not cheap in dynasty. So I don't know. He's gotten steamed up a little bit. He survived free agency, survived the draft, but it's not Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds is not going to do anything to anybody.
No.
And Sean Tucker has all kinds of health problems off the field and he wasn't drafted. So I know they gave him like a big signing bonus, but the amount of money that they gave him relative to like what an NFL team's paying people, it's nothing to the Buccaneers. So I don't know. I think that the idea that somebody's on the roster that could really hurt Rachaad White's definitely the best back on the roster and probably still an okay value, but I don't know if I don't know if the offense is going to be good enough that he could be like a guy that could help win fantasy leagues this year. I think he's probably a guy that you're going to be okay in your RB2. If you want to punt RB2 a little bit, I think he'll be fine. Or you could put him in the flex.
Cardinals. I mean, James Conner's a beast. He had almost every touch last year, but can Keontae Ingram be a league winner?
Keontae Ingram's really, really fun. People are starting to correct on him. Like we saw Jerome Ford has steamed up a ton, and now Keontae's starting to move up a little bit. People hate drafting Cardinals in general right now. So I think it's kind of like it's the idea of drafting the handcuff in Arizona is not like appealing to everyone. But I agree with you. Like Keontae Ingram can catch the football. I think he's a like for like replacement if James Conner goes down, and I think he'd see a lot of volume. So James Conner, guy misses some time. I don't know if Keontae Ingram can be a league winner because, again, I don't think the offense is that great, but I think he could be an RB2, and he's free.
Yes. Hey, Chargers, is Isaiah Spiller dead or just hibernating?
I think Isaiah Spiller's dead. I didn't see anything last year. I know they gave him like a little bit more opportunity in the second half of the year, but there was so much steam with him. You talk about playing Devy, John. Yeah. This is a Devy take lock guy. Like Isaiah Spiller, Kayshon Boutte, people get it in their heads that this is it. The NFL told you what they thought about Spiller. He falls to the 4th round, and then he can't beat out Josh Kelly. And Josh Kelly looked better than him last year. So, like Josh Kelly, I don't think it's anything. I would bet on Josh Kelly. Like if Austin Eckler was lost for the season, I would think Josh Kelly would get more of an opportunity. He's been there longer, and he looked a little bit better last year. So I don't know. I'm not a Spiller guy.
Yeah, Chiefs. Rashee Rice just not a roster clogger because there's so much on this roster, or is he going to supplant some of these guys?
I think that Rashee Rice is like the Juju Smith-Schuster replacement. I don't know how big his ceiling is. I made a comment to somebody in the preseason that I thought this, or like they're in the draft season, that if you look at him versus Tyler Boyd on Player Profiler, like their prospect profiles and everything, it's a little bit similar. Tyler Boyd had a couple of years where he was like the Cincinnati wide receiver 1, but he never really like leapt into like a hugely impactful, but he was a very useful player for fantasy teams. I think like that's the bullish argument, is Rashee Rice could end up being like a wide receiver 1 on his own team and a back end wide receiver 2 for fantasy. I'm kind of into Rashee Rice because there's no one like him on the roster. Like MVS has size, but MVS, you know what he is. Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore are kind of similar guys in terms of like the stuff they do, but Rashee Rice has size. He was extremely productive. SMU just retired his number, which I thought was wild, to retire his number like right after he leaves SMU. I think that's crazy, but he absolutely crushed it. And he's got the opportunity with the best quarterback in the league. So I'm cautiously optimistic on Rashee Rice. I think he could potentially return a lot more to your dynasty team in terms of value than what he costs you right now.
Yeah, I have him like I've been drafting in almost every rookie draft league, but it just seems like they have so much on that team. I don't know what's going to happen. It's Travis Kelce or bust kind of, it feels, but that's the echo chamber of Twitter, and someone's got to be the man someday, you know. So that's Rashee Rice is kind of my guy. Colts, why do they need 72 tight ends on the roster every year? Why is it just constantly drafting guys? Why it's Johnny Woods? Everybody had kind of a favor for him. Then Mo Cox, Colin Granson, Will Mallory's brought in now. Like, what is the problem with this team in tight ends? People have a culture. They kind of have that, but it's every year with these tight ends for the Colts.
So I'm willing to bet. I'm willing to bet on Jelani Woods. I'm not like making big bets on him, but I think that it was the previous coaching staff that was using like multiple guys. I'm hopeful that like you can just see Jelani Woods with like a larger snap share, and it becomes a little bit more normal. And John, I think it's just they've had to bring in so many guys because nobody fit. There was not like, you know, you think back to like the Dallas Clarks and like Indy having like tight end success. There hasn't been a whole lot lately. So like Mo Alley Cox had a really big year. I think they had, you know, but it was on a per snap basis. So Mo Alley Cox would have a couple of big games, but it never happened. You know, he's a converted basketball player, but Jelani Woods has the size. And I think with Anthony Richardson, like having a big tight end who can catch the ball in the red zone, I think could be a big benefit. So I'm kind of sneaky in on Jelani Woods. I've been taking him in best ball.
Yeah. Cowboys, is Jerry Jones crying on a Zeke Elliott pillow every night? When's he coming back?
I hope not. Keep him the hell out of the way. Let's let Tony Pollard have a season, man.
There we go. Dolphins, bigger need, Dalvin Cook or a stud outside bully wide receiver?
Dalvin Cook. I think like what they got out of Waddle and Hill last year was unbelievable. And I think having a little more threat out of the backfield with a guy like Dalvin Cook could make this offense scary. And I'm optimistic for A-Chain with or without Dalvin Cook as a receiver out of the backfield. So I would love to see them get Dalvin Cook. It'd also be good for Dalvin Cook. And if you have Dalvin Cook on your dynasty leagues, that might be the best possible outcome.
Sorry, I'm one of those guys who just loves Jeff Wilson, so I kind of want that to happen.
You're that guy. Okay.
Eagles, Kenny Gainwell will be back. Will be the back to own by what week?
Man, you'd need a double injury for that one. I think Kenny Gainwell is like the kind of guy that he's going to have a couple of games that are going to help you, but you never know when to start him. If DeAndre Swift goes down, then Gainwell kind of comes in play, but we don't know how much Penny. It's a little bit of a mess. I've liked drafting the DeAndre Swift, Kenny Gainwell combo, and if there's attrition, I think one will be usable, but I don't know. Kenny Gainwell, he's definitely a Nick Sirianni guy, and he's definitely had some games, and I think he'll be a constant kind of threat for points, but you'll just never know when to start him, John.
I like Kenny Gainwell. I'm not going to say as the best running back on the team, but I really like him a lot. I think he could possibly supplant Swift in reality. So that's probably a hot take for some people, but Kenny Gainwell I think he's just a fantastic all around football player. Falcons, Kyle Pitts and Tyler Higbee at cost and redraft.
Kyle Pitts. Even though he costs a lot more, I think we've seen Tyler Higbee's best seasons. And Kyle Pitts, for better or for worse, he had 100-plus target season 2 years ago, 1,000 yards 2 years ago. There's not a whole lot of tight ends in the league who've seen those sort of targets and those sort of yardage. I'd take a bet on him doing it again in his career. Higbee, everything went right for him last year. Kupp missed all that time. He's a compiler. I don't hate Higbee, but he's not going to move the needle. If Kyle Pitts could either fail, but he could really move the needle if it hits. And I think that Pitts is probably the best deep threat on their team. Yeah,
I just don't think they're going to pass that much. They're going to run. No matter how much they're down, just kind of, hey, we're going to lose this season. I don't care. We're rebuilding. Let's just go for, let's just run the ball and get killed. Control the clock, I guess. That's kind of their philosophy. But, I don't know why they do what they do, but it is what it is.
Bijan opens up some things, though, John. You get Bijan, one of those pass catchers, even if they don't throw as much, as long as it's consolidated, could have a really big year. So it's just, I think you're betting on London or Pitts. I think they're both talented, and they're both, pretty expensive. But one of them I think could hit just because that guy Bijan is so electric, so dynamite. It's kind of like the Derrick Henry years in Tennessee. You didn't love the offense, but like we were able to get a lot of it out of AJ Brown, under Arthur Smith, even though his targets weren't crazy, just with one of those receivers being extremely efficient.
Yeah. 49ers, Sam Darnold takes his team to the Super Bowl if he can worm his way into a week 1 start and starts winning.
No. Sam Darnold will never start. Will never start in the Super Bowl.
Giants, 9 tight end premium. Isaiah Hodgins or Darren Waller?
Darren Waller. He's going to lead the team in targets.
Good answer. Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence or Jalen Hurts in Dynasty?
Jalen Hurts.
I
love Trevor Lawrence, but Jalen Hurts gives you the incredible upside. Like Trevor Lawrence, do you think he'll have a quarterback 1 overall season in his career?
I just feel like Jalen Hurts is elevated by the team that's surrounded around him. His team makes him better, where Trevor Lawrence makes his team better, where the team makes Jalen Hurts better. That's kind of the only thing I'm at. So I think a long-term answer would be Trevor Lawrence. But I mean, right now it's a razor-thin fine line between their value to me right now. They're that much. But if something happens to, if they lose one of the receivers and everyone gets hurt or something like that, I'm not sure Jalen Hurts could without Brown and without the team around him, I don't think he could be what Jalen Hurts is right now. Trevor Lawrence is making his team better. That's the only way. That's the way I see.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. For me, it's like it's a pure upside play, and I think if you're playing Dynasty in with an 8-year plan, is never it. Like I want to win, and Jalen Hurts, if for the next 3 years is going to score more points than Trevor Lawrence, that's the way I'm going.
It's a small point factor, I think. It's probably, I would say 25 points, but at the end of the season. But 25 points is enough to win or lose seasons, I guess. So, Jaguars. Jets. Better handcuff for Breece Hall, Michael Carter, or Izzy Abanikanda?
I like Izzy Abanikanda. I think he's interesting. Yeah, I think Izzy Abanikanda is good, and you would get Michael Carter gives you some receiving upside, but I think he could still have Knight or Abanikanda as the goal line back if he's the primary guy on the field. Abanikanda, he's a home run ability. He's from Brooklyn, which is kind of cool for the Jets thing. Mm-hmm. Went to the same high school as Stephon Marbury, which is kind of cool. And then he's got that breakaway ability, that true speed, and he's got some size. So I think Abanikanda is interesting if he gets the first crack if Breece Hall missed a couple weeks.
Yeah, I like Michael Carter, but I love big backs that can run, catch, and just do all the kind of. Izzy Abanikanda is. I hate that he went there, but I was expecting him to go somewhere else and needed a running back, and now it's like, oh, it's just such a kick in the nards to have him go to on the Jets. But it is what it is. That's why the NFL does NFL things. Lions dynasty target: Sam Laporta or Jameson Williams? Let's say tight end premium.
Laporta. I love Jameson Williams, but I mean, Laporta is a great opportunity here.
Yes.
And he costs less than Jameson Williams.
Packers, Jaden Reed or Christian Watson in Dynasty?
Christian Watson, but I like Jaden Reed.
Yeah, I like them both. I don't really trust Christian Watson. That's why I asked this question, just because I think Jaden Reed's a more polished player than Christian Watson, who just has just a small skill set. So a fantastic athlete, fantastic receiver as far as certain routes, but I think Jaden Reed is just a better all-around wide receiver. I think my dynasty window was like 3 years, maybe 4, where that handcuffs my ability to kind of judge players so well. I find myself with a lot of faults because I look a little bit too long term instead of win now. But I make the playoffs in almost every league anyway, so it's I get my money back, that kind of stuff. Win some money in a couple leagues, so I'm making money doing fantasy football. But I feel like I need to rein in a little bit of these values on some players. Panthers, screw all these wide receivers. Just draft Hayden Hurst and walk away.
I don't know how much about Hayden Hurst. I like Miles Sanders, though. I think Miles Sanders is going to be used a ton. And I don't know. I don't trust any of these wide receivers.
No.
I know there's some Jonathan Mingo people out there, and I think he'll get a crack. and he's definitely got the size and the speed. But I think it's going to be an ugly situation where a lot of guys are going to get some use. And I think at the end of the day, there's not going to, like, the end of year scoring might be really, really annoying with the wide receivers and with Hayden Hurst. None of them are going to be that impactful.
Right. Patriots. Why does everybody love Pierre Strong and hate Kevin Harris?
I don't know. I like Pierre Strong too. I think Pierre Strong, he was drafted before Kevin Harris. I think Pierre Strong kind of flashed when he got a very limited sample size. And I think Pierre Strong, from media reports, he's a little bit more of like a James White potential in terms of his pass catching ability out of the backfield. And Pierre Strong can fly. Like Harris, I believe, didn't test on the 40, but Pierre Strong can really, really, really run. And Pierre Strong, I think it's cool. He actually passed for a lot of touchdowns in college at South Dakota State. Pierre Strong had like all these touchdown passes. So you had to think like a guy like Bill Belichick's like, I can run some trick plays with Pierre Strong. I think it'll be interesting to see if they give him an opportunity to pass a little bit. It was like a really crazy amount. He had like, I think it's like north of 5 touchdown passes in his career at South Dakota State as at the running back position.
Kevin Harris is really fast too. His pro day was like a 4.43 or something like that. He's really fast also, but I get it. I know what you're saying. Raiders, is it Aiden O'Connell season?
Aiden O'Connell's interesting. I think that like he's worth a stash because Garoppolo has health problems right now. So yeah, Aiden O'Connell's interesting. He put up great numbers at Purdue with your boy Charlie Jones, and he's a little bit older, and I think like it'll be funny if you get Aiden O'Connell and Clayton Thune both starting. It would be good for defensive streaming too, John.
Yes, absolutely. Rams, Cam Akers or Jamal Williams in redraft?
Cam Akers.
All right.
Cam Akers ended the season like a beast, and Cam Akers has nothing behind him. Like Javonte Williams has Samaje Perine behind him. So it's definitely Cam Akers for me.
Very good. Ravens, OBJ or Rashad Bateman as your 5th wide receiver or second flex?
Zay Flowers.
There you go. Even better answer. Look at this guy. Saints, what week does Jameis Winston take over for this offense? You know there had to be a Jameis Winston question going on.
That's your guy. I know you love Jameis Winston. You're still on the Jameis Winston train, but I do think Carr keeps his job because that division is winnable, and I think he's going to win enough games so they're going to be in it right to the end. And you might get a home playoff game in New Orleans. Nobody wants to go into New Orleans and play a playoff game. I don't care how bad the NFC South is. That place would be absolutely rocking. Saints have an opportunity to win that division.
Yeah. Seahawks. Is it weird that I like Zach Charbonnet better than Ken Walker?
I don't think it's weird. I think he's a little bit cheaper, and he's more of a traditional back. Ken Walker's like a home run threat, but I do think like betting against the guys that have a ton of success as a rookie, like the list of running backs who get 1,000 yards as rookies in the NFL, like the last 8 to 10 of them, there's usually future fantasy success involved.
Yeah.
And Ken Walker had some really, really good games last year. He looked the part. But I loved Charbonnet. I love Charbonnet as a prospect too. It's disgusting what Pete Carroll did to put these guys on the same team. We should have 2 guys that we were happy to draft right now and redraft, and instead we have like a potential logjam. But yeah, Charbonnet, it's okay to make your bet. I think this is a situation in Dynasty where the fact is both of them are kind of beat up by the presence of the other. Make a bet. Go get one on your Dynasty team, because if one takes over, they're going to be extremely productive like we saw with Walker last year.
Absolutely. Steelers, why did I trade away Jalen Warren to get Gerald Everett on a team that I was tight end like deficient on? You think that was a good move to get rid of Jalen Warren to get Gerald Everett?
I think it's roster specific. I like Jalen Warren, but I also think Gerald Everett's going to give you like potentially top 15 tight end production. Mm-hmm. But I do think like Jalen Warren, like Najee Harris's receptions went from like the 70s to the 40s. And Jalen Warren came in as an undrafted free agent and got like nearly 30 receptions. So like Jalen Warren, I think, is a Mike Tomlin guy. And if Najee Harris goes down, you're going to hate that trade. Yeah, but if Najee Harris doesn't go down, you're probably like, okay, this made sense for me to, trade this exciting young dynamic guy to get, this tight end 15.
Texans, the pride of Brother Rice, Xavier Valle leads the Texans in rushing this year. True or false?
False. Dameon Pierce will lead him in rushing.
I know. I just have to ask that question because
you got to get
Crusader.
There you go. I love that.
Titans. Will DeAndre Hopkins make this team a playoff contender?
No. Jaguars are going to run away with that division.
Yes. A good answer. Vikings. Is Ty Chandler just a special teamer behind Mr. President and Dwayne McBride?
I think Ty Chandler is interesting. He caught the ball a little bit more in college, and I know like he had good measurables. So I think they're both interesting. Like they're both really pretty fast backs. And how much can Alexander Madison hold up? I think that like the Alexander Madison argument, like I was against it early in the summer, but the drumbeats are there. The coaching staff, the media, the fellow teammates all think he's going to get the opportunity. But John, you know how it is in this league. To go from sub 100 carries and all of a sudden I ask you to carry the ball 250 times, that's hard.
Tough.
If you haven't had that many carries in a season, just to jump to that, that's a big ask. So some guys can handle it. We saw Mike Davis have his career year when Christian McCaffrey went down. And obviously this is not an injury. This is a guy moving on. But like Mike Davis was a top 15 running back. If you picked him up off of waivers, you got a lot of usable weeks with him. And this could be like that with Madison, but I don't know. I think taking shots on those two guys behind him, if they don't bring in another back, those guys are super interesting. And I like McBride a lot. And he was a metrics guy in college. He had like a big yards per rush number, but he doesn't catch the ball at all. And although Chandler didn't catch the ball a ton, he has a little more college production, and he's also got more familiarity with the coaching staff, and he was higher drafted.
All right. But Washington football team, the Commanders. Antonio Gibson is going to win a lot of people a lot of money this year.
I know Antonio Gibson is your guy. I like Antonio Gibson because the fact that he's easily the best receiving back on the roster. And they lost J.D. McKissick, which people say, whatever, J.D. McKissick. But every time J.D. McKissick is on an NFL field, offensive coordinators scheme targets for him. I think he averaged like 5 targets a game even last year in his minimal time. And the season before, obviously, he had his big year. So Antonio Gibson, with a smarter offensive coordinator in Eric Bieniemy, who is going for a head coaching job, couldn't get a head coaching job out of Kansas City. So now he needs to he's got 2 paths to be head coach. Ron Rivera gets fired. He's the next man up, or he does so well. And everybody says, wow, this guy's actually a genius. Look what he did with Washington with Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett. Antonio Gibson's probably the 3rd best offensive threat on that offense behind McLaurin and Dotson. You have to get the ball in Antonio Gibson's hands. I realize what Brian Robinson is. I think he's a Ron Rivera type back. He's not going to fumble, and couldn't be, I guess, efficient. But Antonio Gibson has had NFL success. You've seen him score a lot of fantasy points. I think this year he could have another nice year. And even last year, when you think he was kind of disappeared, he still gave you double-digit points per game in PPR.
Right. He's so underrated. I love the dude. All right. Thanks for going through those. Real fast, we're going to go through some trades in the Mighty McGlynn Dynasty Leagues. Sure. Sam Howell and Joe Mixon for Kenny Pickett. I think Sam Howell and Kenny Pickett are somewhat in the same tier. So to get Joe Mixon in that deal, this was one of my trades. I got Sam Howell and Joe Mixon for Kenny Pickett. How do you think I did on that one?
I think you probably did okay for this year. I just wonder, I think Kenny Pickett's got more long-term stability as starter there because they put a first-round pick into him. And Sam Howell, they can say whatever they want. He could score well in fantasy this year and still get replaced because they got him so late. But I think you're going to like it because Joe Mixon, I think, is going to have a nice year. So yeah, I think this year, I think it helps you.
That was my quarterback 3, either one of them anyway, so I was never going to play him except for bye week. So just to get Joe Mixon as a throw-in for my quarterback 3, I was pretty happy about that. Christian Watson and a 102. So Christian Watson and the 102 for the 101 and a 24 mid-second.
So you get Bijan Robinson and you get a mid-second in next year and this is Superflex?
Yes.
So it's Anthony Richardson and Christian Watson for Bijan Robinson and a pick next year.
Yes.
That's a really good trade. I think that's the kind of value you want if you're a Bijan Robinson manager, because you get in Superflex especially, you get a potential franchise quarterback and a potential wide receiver 1. Am I crazy for saying I like the Bijan Robinson side? I think I like the Bijan Robinson side, even though I think Anthony Richardson's a stud. I think Bijan Robinson, like, at the end of the day, we see what it's like to have rookie year Saquon Barkley or to have the Christian McCaffrey special seasons, to have the Todd Gurley special seasons. Like, having those truly elite 20 to 25 point per game running backs, it's a cheat code. And as good as Anthony Richardson is, I think he's got the best fantasy potential of anybody in this draft class. It's still a slight leap of faith that he's going to reach that level. So I don't know. I'm still Bijan, but I'm don't listen to me on this one, guys. You probably should take the franchise quarterback in Christian Watson. But I'm a Bijan truther. I think he's absolutely unbelievable.
These are all 12-team, 30-man deep dynasty leagues with no kicker, no tight end. I'm sorry,
30 man might make it lean a little bit more to the quarterback too, because it's so much people are rostering every single rosterable quarterback.
Yes.
So it's kind of harder with that. Yeah, I guess in 30 man, you gotta begrudgingly take the quarterback side and not Bijan.
Yeah, it's tough. These are, it is what it is. I don't know. It depends on where you're at, I guess, in rebuild or win now. I guess that's the
if you have 3 good quarterbacks in a 30 man, or not even 3 good, if you have 3 starters, then it's the Bijan side, 100%.
Yes. This one kind of threw me off as a head scratch and it went through. Lamar Jackson, Terry McLaurin in a 24-second, which should be probably early for Joe Burrow and Chase Brown.
Give me the Lamar Jackson side. I love Joe Burrow, but that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a Terry McLaurin at 24. I like Terry McLaurin. I think he's a little bit underrated. I think he goes under the radar, and people kind of don't like him for whatever reason. But even at 24 and probably an early 24-second for this also, and they're pretty good draft class. I like Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow are pretty much a wash as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and also any long-term questions with Lamar Jackson got like alleviated with the amount of money they gave him.
Sure.
So like if that trade during like the weird window of the NFL draft where we didn't know what Lamar Jackson was going to do, I would have probably said Burrow side, but it's the Lamar Jackson side. You get a relatively equal scoring quarterback, plus I get a wide receiver 2, plus I get a pick. And Chase Brown, I don't know. I get it, but he's a 5th round pick, and there's no guarantee he's going to be what people think he is right now in Dynasty.
My draft just ended. I picked everybody. I only had one quarterback. We talked about this earlier. I traded 4. I got Patrick Mahomes, Sky Moore, and Greg Dortch were kind of just throw-ins because of the fact that I do like Sky Moore a little bit, but not a ton. And Greg Dortch is just somebody else getting rid of roster spots because it's still 25 roster spots until year 2. And I gave away Daniel Jones, Mark Andrews, DJ Moore, and a 24 first and second. But now I have Patrick Mahomes and Trevor Lawrence as my 2 starting quarterbacks. So it was a lot to give up. But is it worth Daniel Jones, Mark Andrews, DJ Moore, 24 first and second to get Patrick Mahomes?
Yes, because in Superflex, like you have Lawrence and Mahomes, you're in the top 6. You can, as long as you're okay with the rest of your roster. I would say the only thing that could really tilt this one is if it was a big tight end premium scoring, because I think Mandrew still has a lot more value there than a traditional PPR. But getting the Mahomes side, like you can't, a guy like Patrick Mahomes, you can't use a trade calculator for.
Right.
There's such a gap between him and Daniel Jones. Even if Daniel Jones is like quarterback 6 this year, there's still a massive gap between them. And at the end of the day, if it's not tight end premium, Mark Andrews had one season that could kill you. He had a 17-point per game season during his tight end 1 year, but every other year, like it's not like he's murdering you.
Yeah.
So I think you're probably on the Mahomes side. It's a lot to give up, John, but scared money doesn't make money.
Right. And I had Andrews and TJ Hawkinson on the same team in a tight end premium 0.75. So I have Hawkinson as my fallback, as my tight end 1. So I'm okay with that. Geno Smith, Breece Hall, and Keontae Ingram for Trey Lance, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Kendre Miller. Geno Smith, Breece Hall. And
I'm looking at this one. I'm doing it in my head. Give me the Geno side. Obviously, in the Superflex, you're getting the quarterback, but I love Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think Kendre Miller has a lot of outs. I'm probably going to lean for the Jahmyr Gibbs side here.
Yeah, Kendre Miller. If something happens to number 41 here, we'll see what happens to Kendre Miller. We'll if Kendre Miller could be a first six weeks of the season, that could get you 4 wins to begin the season with having a starting running back and not much competition on a team. So
yeah.
So every week, thanks for doing those trades with me. Every week we evaluate a team. We'll just spend a couple minutes here. I appreciate your time, Theo. Every week we send it. It's a team in the Mighty McGlynn home leagues. It's all of my home leagues I run around here. We decided if it's a simple remodel or a full-scale rebuild, what's the biggest needs of this team? Who are your keep, trade, cut guys? Who would you trade for this team to improve it? And who would you send away? This team is owned by a guy named Jason Tedesco, and it's the Bavaro League. This team came in dead last in 2022. He made some trades, improved his team. He had a bunch of injuries and stuff like that, but he lost in the first round of loser bracket. So He has future draft picks 23, 210. He does not have a first round pick this year. He's got 210, 302, 304, 404, 412, 504, 510. And then 24, he does not have a first round pick either. He's got second, third, fifth. And, so he traded kind of for right now to get his team going. Let's put this team on the board here.
I'm looking at his team now. He's got some nice pieces. I think I would try to potentially consolidate and try to get one more truly elite guy. Because right now he's got Jamar Chase and Chris Olave and Jerry Jeudy. I think that's a really strong wide receiver core. But after that, he's really thin at wideout. I'd rather see him try to maybe move like a James Conner or an A.J. Dillon with a wide receiver like Brandon Cooks. And it looks like a pretty deep format, John, like all of your leagues. But I think it'll be worth taking the risk to try to add somebody that I think could be another 15-point per game type scorer at the wide receiver spot. And then he'd have a little more flexibility year to year because with Akers and Harris, I think he's pretty solid. I don't think either one of those guys is going to be, great this year, but I think he's got 2 RB2s with potential that they could score like low end RB1s. So if I were him, I would try to float like an AJ Dillon, who's still got an Aaron Jones, to deal with. I would float like a Dillon or a Connor with a Brandon Cooks to somebody that maybe needed a little bit more and try to get one more higher scoring wide receiver, even if it meant that I had to take on somebody a little bit older. I think you could reach out and try to get like an Amari Cooper type, someone in that build that's maybe like north of 25, that's affordable, where somebody might say, okay, I'd rather have the pieces. And I think like Connor's going to outscore Dillon this year, and Dillon's younger, so Dillon probably has a little bit more dynasty equity. So like I think a Dillon and a Cooks offer for somebody with a very usable wide receiver that maybe has a little bit of age on him, it might be a trade you could get accomplished.
Yeah, for the non-YouTube audience, when this comes out on podcast, it's Daniel Jones, Najee Harris, Cam Akers, and he's got Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Jerry Jeudy, and then Mark Andrews, James Conner, A.J. Dillon, Matt Stafford as a starting lineup. He's got Jimmy Garoppolo, Sean Mannion, he's going to be cut, Carson Wentz, Rex Burkhead, Justin Jackson, Jamar Jefferson, Jason Funk, Mark Ingram, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, Devontae Parker, Josh Reynolds, Isaiah McKenzie, Ray McLeod, Hunter Renfrow, Anthony Schwartz, Zach Ertz, Logan Thomas, Ian Thomas, and Paul Hendershot. So
it's a terrible bench. It's a terrible bench, but and I think he's got to get a little bit more active, with his bench, really churn that waiver wire. Because half of his team is cuttable, even though it's a 30-man roster. Your biggest weeks of adding guys will be the week before the NFL season. Whenever you open up waivers, John, I don't know when you do, but the first and second week of the season historically are 2 of the best weeks for waivers. He should prioritize that. Don't overlook a guy getting a little bit of early season, touches or even early season snaps. Because if somebody looks like they're going to break in and get a lot of playing time, churn that roster. That bench is horrible, but the starters are definitely solid. So I would do 2 things. I would try to consolidate, get one more scorer, which sounds like counterintuitive because I'm asking you to get a little less deep, but I'm consolidate a little bit and then really, really churn. And you might want to consider trying to get a Kyron Williams or a Zach Evans cheap because you have so much riding on Cam Akers.
Yeah, he's definitely has his starting lineup here. He's got a lot of draft picks right now. I think he's got 6 or 7 draft picks in this year's draft, in a deep draft, not a stud draft, but we'll see what happens. But I appreciate your chiming in. I appreciate you joining the show this week. Thanks a lot, Theo. It's always a pleasure having you on, and your knowledge of fantasy football is immense. So everything you say on here is I take it with a huge respect. So thanks so much for joining. Where can everybody find you at?
You can find me at the OG Fantasy on Twitter. You can find my written work on playerprofiler.com. You can find me on my podcasts on Player Profiler. You can subscribe to the main feed of Player Profiler, or you can subscribe to the podcast individually. Goat District, definitely follow as well. And yeah, this was a blast. I love talking shop with you, John. I hope you have a great rest of your summer, and thanks for having me on, man.
That's right. Thanks for everybody joining in for the possible. It makes the show awesome because I love doing this. I love having guys like this on here. And thanks for joining me this week, guys. Thanks for joining me every week. And got a couple good guests coming up next couple weeks. And welcome. Good luck in your fishbowl. Good luck on your fishbowl drafts. And see everybody in the Chicago draft on next Sunday afternoon in Elk Grove Village. Thank you very much, everyone. And we will see you later. Have a good day. Have a good fishbowl. Have a great life.
Never overrated playing for number one. And yo, McGlynn is in. It's time to let the fun begin. It's the Commissioner Evaluation Podcast with John McGlynn.